Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another social emotional workshop. We have Joe and Teresa back again. Today, we are going to be talking about creating boundaries with your students and your children and with people in general. Um, good is a very good lesson, and we're excited to get into it. Take it away, Joe and Teresa.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. So, we're going to be talking about boundaries because I'm sure you guys have seen, just like Joe and I have, in your work that, parents usually have a hard time with boundaries. They're either too lax or they're too strict. And I think people have a hard time understanding the importance of it, how it helps kids and how it helps the parents alike. And so we had done this training for some other members in our community, and it seems like I feel like it covers everything pretty well, although a lot of it might sound to you guys like things that you already know about. Um, and so we always start off talking about the fact that nobody wants to be the bad guy and make or create the boundaries, especially now because both parents are working, versus like when I grew up, just my dad worked. My mom worked at home, taking care of five kids. And so she was frequently the bad guy, where my dad would come home and, nobody saw him all day. Sometimes he had two jobs, so we didn't see him for even longer periods during the day. But, she was home, so she was the one who had to create all the boundaries. And now both parents have to do it. And I think part of the reasons why their boundaries either get lax or they get too strict is because they haven't seen these kids all day long. They don't want to be the ones to say no, but no is a gift that you can tell this child so that they can learn what boundaries are. And so, boundaries are important because they teach what's acceptable, and kids thrive on those boundaries, even though they don't want them. But we know that when they don't want them, when they want to just be able to do anything they want, they tend to be, self-centered and entitled. Like everybody exists only for them and only their needs are important. And we know that kids have a tendency to be self-centered because that's part of their development. It's part of them growing up. And so they need those boundaries to understand, no, it's really not all about you, that, you have to take into consideration other people. And also, it helps them to become more self-aware. When they don't know what their boundaries are, they don't know who they are. What are their values? What's important to them? And when they feel out of control, they get frustrated and they lash out at other people. And they try to put themselves in control all the time when somebody else is not. And I remember when my son was a teenager, he had a friend, early adolescent, like, 13. He had a friend who was being raised by his grandmother. And she had, two kids that were grown, and now she was taking care of her grandson. And so I did the typical thing when Luke went out, who, what, where, and when. And so, he was rolling his eyes, and of course he answered my questions, but, he didn't want to look like, a baby in front of his friends. But as they were walking out the door, I heard his friend say, "Hey, at least somebody cares where you're going." Because I knew this particular kid, he could stay up all night, come home whenever he wanted, 13. Probably because his poor grandma was working over here. I live close to the Chrysler plant, and I think she worked there. And again, she didn't want to be the bad guy. And she was probably tired. She had to be in her 50s at that time. She was probably just tired. But so kids really value those. And I liked this quote when I saw it about needing boundaries. Just in case you aren't looking at it, I'm going to read it to you. It says, "I use the metaphor of driving over a bridge. If there are no guardrails, you're going to drive pretty slowly. And not only that, you're not really going to pay attention to the beauty of the world around you. You're going to be focused on getting across that bridge safely and not going over the edge, which has no limits. And that's by Nicole Holtluler. I don't know, she's Radical Beginnings. I found that on the Montessori Notebook. And I just thought that was a good um, metaphor for what it must feel like to a child or a teenager that doesn't have those boundaries. They're so busy looking around trying to figure out how to keep themselves safe because they don't know what their values are, that they're missing a lot of the joy of just being a teenager and being able to count on your parents helping you decide what your guidelines should be in life. And I think a lot of the issue sometimes starts with even parents themselves don't have the proper boundaries. And so they end up feeling like this poor mom, with all those kids squirming all over them, trying to get their attention, trying to keep them in line all the time. And a lot of parents will violate their own boundaries by feeling like they want to be liked by their kids. And I hear that a lot in parenting classes in different ways. I'll hear parents say, well, then they're going to cry. They'll be upset if I tell them, no, they can't do this. Or, and in my head, I would never say this out loud, but I think to myself, okay, so what? So they feel upset. That's part of life. And they'll get through that and they'll get to the other side. Let them sit with those uncomfortable feelings. That's okay. Or they always need to rescue their kids and make sure that everything they do is good. I went through that, they'll say. I've been through the worst part of it, and I don't want them to have to go through it too. Or the next two, allowing your kids to decide what you think about things. So parents that are kind of wishy-washy about what they believe. And, they have a hard time articulating it because they know their kids are going to be upset. And so they hem and haw, they're wishy-washy. I totally believe in hearing kids out and letting them speak their what they want, what they think about something or why they think something's unfair. That's totally fine. But if your boundaries are about health and safety and respect, then it's still respectful to them to let them air their grievances, but that's not going to change my mind. I'm still going to have to say no in the end. And then the next two also, making kids the center of your life so that it interferes with your other relationships, like your friends and your partner. So kids are important. Yeah, they're one of the most important jobs that we have to do, but we have to have boundaries too, where we, take some time for ourselves, for self-care. And we, take some time to nourish our other relationships. That's just going to make us healthy. And it's a good role model for kids too, to see how to take care of ourselves and the people that are most important to us. I know of a parent who constantly, she used to work at care, and her kids would be crawling all over her, literally crawling on her head, on her shoulders. And I'm not talking about a 2-year-old. I'm talking about kids that are school age, over 5 years old. Constantly crawling over her and interrupting her during meetings. And I just thought to myself that that's not doing that kid any favors, neither one of her kids. They need to understand that this is work time and then there'll be playtime. So as they get older, I think that's going to be harder for her to institute with them. I think that she needs to get started on that now, because I think it makes her feel kind of haggard too, although I don't think she'd say that. So when I talk to parents about boundaries, I ask them to think about what's really important to them, because that's going to be a boundary that you're more likely to stick with. If you pick something that's important to your mom, your sister, or your friend, it's not going to be important to you. And so we need to create things based on what we think our morals are and what's most important to us and our family. And I think it's also important to ask yourself what is non-negotiable and what is not. Things that involve health and safety and respect should be non-negotiable, like curfew or who they hang around with or homework or using illegal substances or even when they engage in sexual behavior. For others, other things, they can be more flexible, and that actually helps them to understand what's important to you. If everything is a rigid boundary all the time, they don't really know what's important and what's not. So during our parenting classes, that's one of the very first things that we talk about in a parenting class is, what's their problem and what's ours. So a parent problem is anything that goes against, is this dangerous for the child or the people around them? Can property be damaged? Is this disrespecting me? And are they old enough to handle this on their own? Or are they unable to handle this on their own? So any one of those questions, if you answer no to it, then it would be a child-owned problem, and you can be a little bit more flexible because none of those things are involving respect or safety. Because that's what basically the questions are. Does it disrespect me? Can anyone or anything get hurt or damaged? Or, are they unable to handle this on their own? So those are all health and safety and respect. And so those that deal with that have to be a no budge type of boundary. And so when we talk to them about boundaries, another thing I think that gets in the way with parents and their kids is that how they approach the subject. We talked before about their brain development and how they're reacting to us from their emotional brain. And so even when you're talking to them about something that's really important, sometimes they'll say, "Stop yelling at me." And you're not yelling. You're not angry, but they're reading your face. They're listening to your tone. They're reacting from their emotional brain. So to them, they could be presuming that you're angry by looking at your face. I know sometimes I look mad when I'm not, and I can also sometimes not tell when my voice sounds angry. If I feel strongly about something and I'm talking about it, my voice might sound more harsh, or my sentences might sound more clipped, and blunt. And I'm not really mad. I just feel strongly about something. But when we're talking with kids, we have to realize that what we say is only 10%. And if we're trying to catch some bees, we got to make sure that our tone and our face is injecting honey and not vinegar. We're trying to get them to buy into it because that's just going to make a lot more easier for us. So we have to look at what we sound like and what we look like. So body language is not only your face, but it's also the way, are you standing over them? Are your arms crossed? Is your body turned away? That all sends a message that I'm not hearing you. I'm not listening to you. And of course, if your voice does sound louder or clipped or blunt, you might sound angry. Or if your voice sounds really breathless and high pitched, you could be coming off as insecure, and you're also not creating a boundary because that's making it sound like you're not really sure of yourself. So it's up to us, because we're in our rational brains and not in our emotional brain, to make sure that we sound and look like somebody who means business, but it is also caring about how the other person feels. So respect both ways. That's what I'm getting at here. And so I want to ask you guys, if you're looking at your screen, do you see a horse here? Or do you see just a frog?
I see a frog.
I see a frog.
Anybody see a horse?
I see a horse and a frog.
You do?
I see both also.
You do? Okay.
Yeah.
Anybody not see the horse?
I don't see the horse.
Okay. Anybody else? Is that only just one person?
I don't see the horse.
I don't see the horse.
Okay. How about that? Does that help?
I see the horse now.
I see it.
Now
Yeah.
I see it.
Can you see it now? Or do you have to see it this way?
Yes. I
Okay.
saw it when you, yeah, after you pointed it
Okay.
out, I saw it. I had to
Okay.
turn my head, but
I had to turn my head too.
Okay, so you had to adjust in order to see that horse. Yeah. Yeah. And so the point of that, I bet you already know, is that they're not going to see things the way we do. You know, they're going to be seeing this while we're saying this. And even when we go back and help them, they're still going to be seeing this unless they adjust themselves a little bit, which might take a while. So we have to take that into account because you know how kids are. You know, we know the dangers that are out there, but if we try to tell them about that, they're just going to say, yeah, you know, I'm a man or I'm a grown woman, you know, at 15. And I know that already. And that's part of just growing up. That's part of their development. And sometimes it's hard for us to distinguish because by then they look like adults and we expect them to act like it. But they're still in that emotional brain because they still got a good 10 years, 12 years before, you know, that rational brain comes in, the executive brain. And so their job's going to be to test those boundaries. And, you know, another reason for us to help them to buy into it with our tone and the way we look and the way we approach it. You know, they just need some time to understand that. There are so many things that I remember, especially with my daughter, you know, you can't tell her anything, just nothing. She has to figure it out on her own. Her brother does it in a lot harder way, but even my daughter Leah, who's so easy to get along with, you know, there are times when I'm just telling her the truth and she just keeps seeing this frog and I'm trying to explain the horse to her so bad. And then I have to realize I just got to back off because she's going to find out on her own. And when she was young, I did the best I could with boundaries. And I think I kept her pretty safe, but it's just always hard. So, you know, with really young kids, we have to start when they're toddlers. And we have to expect some pushback because that's part of their development, you know, is to push against us when they're 2 years old, 18 months old, 3 years old. You know, their brain development's still taking place and they don't have that ability to manage their emotions very well. So the only reason I keep mentioning is this, is that it helps with your frustration on your end. So when you're laying down boundaries for small children, they have this CALM acronym, which I really liked. Be concise and clear. Okay, do not throw your toys. And always check if they understand. I had to do this with my son a lot. Do you understand what I'm trying to tell you? You know, what do I want you to do? What don't I want you to do? I had to make him repeat it back to me because he would always come up with some reason afterwards, you know, why he didn't understand it. And then you have to, you know, set the consequences up. You know, if you choose to throw this, then I'll be taking it away for the rest of the day or the rest of the afternoon. You know, when they're toddlers, you don't want to take it too long. You know, you want to be able to let them remember and make amends. Remember, if I give this to you and you throw it, I'll have to take it away till tomorrow. You know, so they have to understand and they have to hear it repeated a lot. You know, kids need to hear things like 8 to 10 times. Gifted kids can hear it once, but typical kids have to hear it a lot more to understand it, especially when they're toddlers. And you always have to follow through. If the child decides to go through with the unwanted action, then you have to follow up with the consequence. And please try to make it related, you know, especially when you get past the toddler years and you get into school age, teen years, you know, if you just take away their technology for everything, it doesn't mean anything to them anymore. And I think this is one of the hardest things for parents to do when they're coming up with consequences is to make it real, you know, related to what they are actually doing. And when they do, and they come back to the class and they talk about the fact that, you know, they're having trouble coming up with that related consequence, I always tell them, are you still in that punishment mode in your head? Because it's not about punishment. It's about what do you need them to learn right then in that very moment. What is it you need for them to understand? So if a toddler's playing too close to the street, okay, then we have to play in the backyard where it's fenced in. We're not playing at all. You're going to go in the house. We're not playing out here at all, because that's punishment mode. But if you can think of it as, what do I need them to learn? It makes finding a related consequence a lot easier. And I think that M, you must make sure you follow through, is also really important, because I tell parents, you don't want to teach them that you don't really mean what you say. And if you talk to kids more than once, that's exactly the message that they're getting. Okay, it doesn't really mean anything to her now. Let her tell me 3 or 4 more times, and then I know she really means it. So, ask once, or lay out the instructions once. So I don't want you to throw your toy. Do you understand that? If you choose to throw this toy, then that means you choose for me to put it away for the rest of the afternoon. You decide. And then just follow through. Give them another warning. Make sure they're looking at you when you say it. Make sure they understand. And then act on it the first time. You don't need to talk to kids more than once. Any questions so far, or comments that you'd like to add?
I like to add that parents talk about that 1, 2, 3. They always give them that 1, 2, 3. And that's kind of teaching them that what you say the first time doesn't really mean anything or matter.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly the same thing. I don't really mean it the first time. Let me hear her say it, or him. I shouldn't always say her. Let him or her say it 5 or 6 more times, and then I know they mean it. Yeah, that's the one thing I didn't like about 1, 2, 3. I shouldn't have to do that. Although, kids need transitions, especially toddlers, but transitions can be handled differently. We can give them, even though they don't understand time increments, hey, we're going to be leaving in a few minutes. You need to get your shoes on, or I'll put them on for you. And give them a few minutes, and then just act on it. And avoid all those arguments that always seem to come up. Is that what you mean, Joe?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so there's something that I would like to add in here, which I think is really interesting. Joe's going to show us this video. It's by Brian Post of the Post Institute. And Joe showed this to me once. And it never occurred to me, even though we were just talking about transitions, I always think of transitions in terms of toddlers and preschoolers. I never think of it in terms of school age and teenage years. And so Joe showed this to me one time, and I thought it was so interesting. So I'm going to stop sharing here, Joe, and then go ahead and let you show that.
Okay. Okay, give me a thumbs up, Teresa, if you can hear it.
Okay.
You were a child, how many of you could huff and puff and roll your eyes at your parents and get away with it? Freely, openly. Any
Probably about half.
half? Okay, half.
Yeah.
Half. We'll take half. What else? Just, and Dad says something. Dad, how many of you, Dad could tell you to take out the trash when you were a kid, you could go,
As long as you did it. I mean, you roll your eyes all you want, but you still have to do it.
or how many of you could freely go, oh, gosh. Right? It's kind of limited, isn't it? All right, but see, the significance is that is an emotional expression. You roll your eyes, you huff and you puff in order to adjust in the moment. See, when Dad says take out the trash, you go, oh, because taking out the trash taking out the trash is a major transition from what you're doing. So the moment you roll your eyes, your body is making an emotional adjustment to get up from what you're doing to go take out the trash. Now, what if Dad turns around and says, don't you roll your eyes at me. You do what I tell you to do when I tell you to do it. Then what Dad is saying is, don't give me that attitude, which is internally saying we can't make that emotional adjustment. So then we have to straighten up and become a little more rigid.
What? I mean, cause I heard that example before, but which I understand where you're going with that, but I can't wait to hear what you're gonna say about how to bring harmony and willingness to help and be, and not, cause that kind of attitude can just really wear down the home life and atmosphere.
Now that is such a great comment, because if that kind of attitude can really wear down the home life, imagine what happens when you're not able to express that attitude, and now you have to express through feelings. So instead of going, you go, I ain't doing that. That stuff's stupid. You do it yourself. That's a bunch of crap. Now imagine.
That's feelings?
That's feelings. Imagine how quickly feelings could wear down the home life. If attitudes wear down the home life, imagine how much getting lip from your child every time you ask him to do something could wear down the home life.
Okay.
All right, so we're just going to go down in intensity. And if feelings could really wear down the home life, imagine how intense and how quickly behaviors could wear down the home life. So if I can't roll my eyes, and if I can't go, well, I don't want to do that, imagine how quickly home life would deteriorate if you asked me to do something and I busted this chair, I kicked over this lamp, or I pushed you. See where we're going?
Yes, I do.
We're just going down. So then we wonder, well, oh my gosh, attitude, how do you create some harmony and some balance?
Take it.
With rolling eyes. So see, this becomes very important.
So what did you guys think? Any comments about that?
Unacceptable. You're not allowed to roll your eyes and have attitude. I was never allowed to do it, and I learned to control my emotions. I learned to breathe. I learned another outlet, but neither is okay. I don't think it's okay to stomp your feet and huff and puff, and it's not okay to be outward with your feelings either. Breathe, control your emotions, and be respectful.
Okay, did you get the the progression from just rolling their eyes to yelling and then kicking things around? Did you how he's talking about, one can, if one is stunted or stopped or controlled outside of them, the next one is the feelings and the yelling, and then after that, if they're not allowed to do that, then the next one is kicking. And did you catch that part of it? Because
Yeah.
it sounds like you thought, to me, what I interpreted what you just said is that Brian is saying all three of those things are okay. Is that what you meant? Or did I hear
I
you
think
wrong?
he said that we should accept the rolling of the eyes because that's them adjusting, like we were adjusting to the picture. That's them adjusting, and we should accept it, because if we don't, it could come out another way. But I don't want to accept either way.
Okay. I understand that. That would be, especially if we weren't raised that way. None of us probably really were, because our parents, weren't into learning about, why kids behave the way they do. I know my parents never did. I grew up in the 60s and the 70s, and they weren't interested in finding out about, how kids grow up with their brain development, what the actions can be interpreted as. I thought it interesting that what he was trying to explain is that eye rolling and that huffing and puffing is just a transition from doing one thing to the next, not so much directed at us, but just directed at, man, I don't want to stop what I'm doing. I really don't want to take out the garbage. But it's like that lady said, they're going to do it anyway. And it's just
Yeah,
their
my thing
choice.
is, if you could reason with me, if you could say in a respectful way, Mom, I'm right in the middle of this game. Can I just finish this level and then do it? Absolutely. If you can respectfully reason with me, I'm going to grant your request. But I'm never going to tolerate rude and disrespectful behavior, because if I allow it, then they're going to go to school and they're going to do it, and they're going to want to roll their eye at the teacher. And trust me, I've had some eye rolling students. Unacceptable.
Yeah. I
And
understand.
I am
totally
old
get it.
school. I'm old school.
Yeah.
I grew
yeah.
up when you grew up, you know, but I did have friends who fussed and stomped their feet and no, mom. And I was just like, but they got away with it. They turned out to be wonderful adults, but you know, just a different way of raising children, I guess.
Yeah. Just different information that we have now that they probably didn't have 30, 40 years ago. Um, when I see my kids doing that, I didn't take it really personally because I knew that just because they looked like adults that they weren't really, and we always want to be, there's always that learning curve that we go through with kids where we teach them the boundaries of this is how you will talk to me and this is what I will not accept. I didn't try to force my kids to talk to me a certain way because I can't control that unless I do something abusive like put tape over their mouth or try to punish them into submission. And I myself was not willing to do that.
No, I didn't do that either. I
Yeah.
never disciplined in frustration. If I was frustrated, it would be go to your room. We'll talk about it, you know, shortly. And I was always able to sit and talk with them, even as a very young age. You know, this is what we expect. This is what mommy and daddy, this is acceptable. This is not acceptable. And it was not yelling and screaming and me trying to force them, but they knew that there were family rules and they had to follow them as members of the family.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's all included in here. And what I think that particular video has 3 parts to it. And so we always need to work on communication skills with kids and we need to work on boundaries. And that's why I brought this up, especially this video. I think I believe that it's part of showing them that it's okay to feel that. To me, it doesn't bother me. I never took that personally that, I didn't find it myself. Excuse me, you guys, I have allergies. I didn't find it myself to be disrespectful. I would have felt disrespectful if they would have like yelled and screamed or tried to kick something over, but my kids didn't do that. They might have rolled their eyes and I ignored it because I didn't want them to get attention, for negative behavior. So,
I guess I'm very sensitive. In all my years of teaching, I had one student and he used to roll his eyes every time I asked him to do anything. And I had a real problem with it. His parents had a problem with it. And we all worked at trying to change him. I don't think we ever got through to him. I don't think we ever changed him. And I do worry about, he just constantly bucked at any authority. And that's just the way he was. I fear that he's going to have problems as an adult because no matter who you are, we all have to answer to somebody, all of us. We've got to follow the laws and,
in all fairness to that kid, we don't really know what was going on with him either.
I know what was going on with him. I do. I mean, I had countless conversations with his parents over and over and over. It was something that he went through his entire elementary experience. I had him in 5th and 6th grade, and he did not like authority, no matter what it was. He wanted to do what he wanted to do. And he was very rude and very disrespectful. And I never had a student like that before. When I would discipline him, he would turn his chair around and sit at his desk and stare at me. In other words, I am not going to do this work. I'm going to show you that I'm going to do what I want to do. And I ignored the action because he was trying to get a reaction out of me. Instead of working, you can't do anything to me if I turn my chair around and stare you down. And that's what he would do most of his, time. And then he would have consequences for not having his work done. But that's who he is.
Joe, did you want to add something? I keep seeing you put your hand up.
Yeah, I just didn't want to interrupt the good conversation.
Yeah, I understand.
So 2 things, like something that Gwen said that when she grew up, that wasn't acceptable and she learned other ways to deal with that transition. Now, that's great if it worked for you and you were able to do that. But the stuff that Teresa had about the brain development, that, kids' emotional management and empathy is not developed until 25, 27 years old. So there may be a child who is able to use healthy coping skills to deal with that transition, but maybe not. And I think what Brian Post is talking about, that we're not saying that they could do that and to let it go, They're saying when they do it, they need to do it at the moment. So if we told them at the moment, don't give me that sass, that's just going to create more of a power struggle or more of an emotional reaction. So if they take out the trash huffing and puffing, the trash is being taken out. So just bide your time, let them give that emotional sass, or what they call it. What did he call it? That sarcasm, the emotional huffing and puffing.
I can't remember the name, Joe.
Yes. So, and then after that, when everybody's calm, you can say, you know, lately I've been noticing every time I ask you to do something that you have a lot of, man, I forgot that word that he used. It was behavior, feelings. I'm going to call it huffing and puffing or sass. So then we can talk about that at that time. But he's saying ignore that transition of those feelings, attitude, that's what it was. Ignore that attitude for the moment because he's taking out the trash, and then address it later in a more lower level emotional state where you can say, you know, I've been noticing a lot of, you know, attitude when I tell you to do something. Well, Dad, you told me because I was there in the middle of this game and stuff, and then you told me to do it, and I just got annoyed. And then we can talk about ways that we can communicate and, you know, get that chore done without the attitude or without the reminding.
I definitely hear what you're saying, but I just feel that there's two different schools of thought. And I just from the school of thought that I would not say, don't give me that sass, because I'm not modeling the behavior that I want. So I wouldn't do that. But at the same time, I'm still not going to allow you to do it. And it was just like, you know, Dr. Spock wrote a book and don't do this and don't do that.
Yeah.
And I appreciate where he's coming from. And he may be dealing with different students with different issues and different children. But for me and my beliefs and my thoughts, I would never accept that. But I would model for that student or my child the action and the behavior that I was expecting. That's what I would do. I would not accept the sass or the huffing and puffing. I wouldn't accept it.
Joe, I can appreciate what you're saying as far as it's not necessarily that you're accepting it. You have to choose the right moment to address it. I think that's what I'm getting from you. From the video, I felt like the facilitator was saying, you know, that's just a part of their development and, you know, just let it go. And I agree with Gwen, the same thing. You have to, how do you show somebody how to respect you, right? Like you don't just take whatever, you have to train people on how to respect you. And childhood is a proving ground, a training ground. And we have a job as parents to guide them. But I do agree that you have to do it with wisdom. So if it's going to create more, if you addressing it in the height of the emotion may cause the situation to be more volatile. I could see what you're saying there, but it does need to be addressed sooner rather than later. Because I know that there's some rationale that has to come into play too. So when you're emotional, you're not going to think very rational, right? So there are some steps, but it's a difference between saying, oh, that's just their development, let it go. Because when you give them an inch, they'll take a mile. So if you say, okay, I accept eye rolling, then next the kid is going to take it like, oh, they accept eye rolling. Oh, now I'm going to mouth off. Now I'm going to start getting physical. There has to be boundaries set.
Yeah, and you know what, you know what, I have to stop you for a minute because we only saw like maybe a minute of his presentation. There's like actually 3 parts to that. And so I don't think he's trying to say, let it go and don't ever address it. I think we can all agree that it needs to be addressed, but not, you know, as you both are saying, you know, not at the time that it's going on, but there is a certain part of child development that we have to accept. And if you, you know, get into a scrap with them every time, and a scrap could be just be paying attention to negative behavior, then, you know, you may as well walk around with a red button on your forehead that says, this is what I hate. And every time you do it and they want to get back at you, they're going to be pressing that red button, letting you know, I know what sets you off. So that's all, I think we can all agree that we would never let that go as if it means nothing. But if we can catch that, in the beginning and just ignore the huffing and puffing, and then later on, like Joe was saying, which you guys agreed with, talk about different ways of communication. Huffing and puffing doesn't need to be, punished. It just has to be like, okay, that's an immature brain, doesn't know how to manage. I don't really need to pay attention. And when you pay attention to it, it goes away as far, at the moment. But later on, yeah, we do teach kids how to respect us, how to treat us by the way we treat them. So some of it, and I will not sit here and believe that nobody comes home in a bad mood and takes it out on the people that they love sometime. That just happens. It doesn't happen all the time, but it does slip out when you're having a really bad day. And I think that's what they're doing in an immature way too, is that they're angry about something and they're just eye rolling, which is a lot less uh, obtrusive than stomping around and yelling and screaming and kicking things over. At least we can agree with that.
Yeah, Teresa, let me tell you this quick story, because when I share this, I talk about adults do the same thing. Picture this, that you just had a hard week. You're planning, Friday evening or Saturday, you're just going to chill at home. You're going to get a movie. I live alone. So it's like, all right, I'm going to send myself some flowers, I'm going to get a movie. I'm just going to say, man, I just want this peaceful evening by myself. And I got to, turn the TV on, and I got my beverage, and I got my popcorn and the beautiful flowers on the table. And I turn the movie on, and then the doorbell rings. And I'm like, oh my, who is, I get to the door and I'm like, what? That's that my day was changed, and my attitude kind of comes out, and I need to express that. Oh my goodness, who's interrupting this wonderful evening I'm having? And that's kind of the same thing that maybe a child will do. And if we address it as in this is not acceptable behavior and you will not behave that way, and of course you guys didn't explain it that way, then it creates that child has to suppress that. So some of those attitudes we as adults even express when somebody interrupts us when we're totally focused on a project. What do you want? So that's just a whole emotional management. I don't know if that makes it any more clear that adults go through the same attitude adjustment.
My kids in my class used to laugh at me because when the phone would ring, I'm right in the middle of a lesson and I would be like, oh, I would do that.
Yeah.
I'd go over to
And
the
if
phone,
I say,
but hold on, I'd answer the phone and I would go, Mrs. Grace's room. And they would always laugh at me. But that was me learning to control that feeling, because yes, I felt, and who it was safe to do that with, I would do that with. But whoever was on the other end of that phone was going to get my respect. I wasn't going to answer my phone. What? I'm in the middle of a lesson. I would answer the phone and go, Mrs. Grace's room.
How nice that they felt that your kids can feel safe with you and just let out that exasperation,
Sure.
Yeah, that's a good story. And I think kids would kind of learn that as long as we understand that their behavior, that outburst was a typical reaction, and that it does disrupt the trust or the relationship a little bit. So we have to find another way or other coping skills to make those transitions. So I think we're talking about the same things.
Yeah, it's hard to see that little clip and understand his whole message without watching all three of those together. Wouldn't you say, Joe?
Yeah.
Kind of watch the whole thing to understand what he's getting at. I just like the idea of understanding transitions, because to me it was just teenage or toddlers that needed that transition. But I think everybody does, and you guys, both of you, have just proven that adults do it too. And I liked what she just said about you can let it out with somebody that you feel safe with, without feeling that it's the wrong thing to do. Because we always want our kids to feel safe coming to us, even when things are uncomfortable. If my kid were ever to do that and feel that, they could also call me names while they were at it, or
Whoa.
make fun of me and said that, okay, that's totally different. There comes my boundary where I'm not going to allow that either. And so this kind of goes along with it. You don't have to attend every argument that you're invited to, or what Joe and I always say is you don't have to go to every party that you're invited to. And so a lot of times as my kids were growing up, the way that I would show them how they are going to treat me is that I would just say, I'm not willing to talk to you when you're acting this way. And so I would ignore them. And I remember I always tell this story in my classes about when Luke was 13 and I picked him and his friends up from somewhere where they were, him and Ryan and Brian and Ray, always driving your teenagers around. And at the time, they didn't have cell phone. We had a huge computer sitting on our in our desk in the living room. And Ray, who's the young kid that his grandma was raising him and could do whatever he wanted, was telling Luke, they were the last two because Ray lived down the street from us. When we get home, I'll get on AOL with you. We'll talk. And right in front of his friends, I said, you're not going to be on the computer when you get home. It's 10:30 and you got school tomorrow. And so Luke didn't say anything in the car, but when we got home, he went off. And, he was raising his voice. He didn't call me names because I never called my kids names. He didn't try to be threatening because I didn't threaten them ever. He's just, walking around and throwing his weight around and, being angry. And I could feel myself getting angry, which I could tell is a power struggle. So I withdrew because I wanted to role model what it looks like to withdraw from a power struggle when people are acting out of control. And so I said, you know what, Luke, I'm not willing to talk to you when you're like this. We're both angry right now. And so we'll talk in the morning. And his last comment was, well, fine, I'll just get up when you're asleep and I'll go and get on the computer and you'll never know. And I said, yeah, you could probably do that. I'm not going to waste my time trying to hold your doorknob closed all night. There would be consequences. So, think about how you want things to go moving forward. And so, when I got into my room, he was standing outside my door trying to talk, say things, and I just ignored him, walked in my room, closed the door, and their dad said, well, that worked out really well. And I said, yeah, actually, you know what it did? Because I didn't lose my temper. I didn't scream and yell because that's what he wanted. And so the next morning, I was all ready to say, Lucas, you know, I realize that I shouldn't have said that in front of your friends. I know that it embarrassed you because he's 13 years old. Who wants to stand in front of their friends and have their mommy tell them you're going to bed when you get home? But I only got like half of that out. And he goes, no, Mom, I was being a putz. I'm sorry. I know I was being an idiot, you know. And I said, well, I embarrassed you. He goes, yeah, I was embarrassed. I know, but still, you know. And I said, well, we lose our tempers. And that's why I stopped talking to you because I didn't want to lose my temper. So, you don't have to go to that party just because they invite you to it. When everybody's calmed down, I think Joe already said that, we could talk about this and we'll be able to, fix the road here going down the road from this point on. And so also when we're raising our kids, after they, or, after their toddlerhood going into school age, we need to explain to them what it means to be assertive. That's part of the whole learning curve here. Besides accepting what they're going through developmentally, we need to explain to them what aggressive, assertive, and passive is all about. We need for them to understand what it means. A lot of people get aggressive and assertive mixed up. They think that if they get in your face and scream about it, that they're being assertive, and they're not, but they don't understand that. So it needs to be made clear to them. And we also have to give kids the power to say no. And I got another story for you because I think this is important. We talked about this last night. We were talking about girl empowerment in a presentation that we were doing. And we talked about giving kids the power over their own bodies, who touches them. And we talked about consent and the power of no. And when Leah was little, I came from an Italian family. And so, You can't go from one room to the other without somebody grabbing you and kissing you or shoving food in your face. You know how Italian parents are. And so Leah went through this thing when she was about 4 years old where she did not want it to be kissed. And my parents were so hurt, and I said to her, okay, I can see that you don't want to kiss anybody. Can you give them a hug? No, don't want to do that either. I said, okay, all right, we'll try again next time. And when she got in the car, they were just like, how could you let her do that? How could you? And I said, you know what, you guys, this is going to pass. This is just a phase. She'll probably be here in a couple days and be all over you again. But, I don't want to take away the power of her to say no to somebody who's trying to touch her. I want to give her, bodily autonomy. She wasn't disrespectful. She wasn't mean. She didn't yell at them. She just said no. When he asked for a kiss, she said, no, I don't want a kiss. And she did that to my mom too. And then I was right the next week because we went every Sunday to have dinner over there. The next Sunday, it was forgotten about. I was afraid my parents were going to bring it up, but they didn't. As soon as she came in the house, she ran up to them and hugged them and kissed them, and it was over. But I've always tried to stress that nobody should touch you unless you say it's okay. Nobody should make you do something that doesn't feel right in your stomach. If it feels weird to you, then you have every right to say no, whether it's a teacher or whether it's a parent. You can be respectful when you say no, but actually saying no to someone is not disrespectful. It's creating those boundaries that everybody needs. And so we have to model it for ourselves too, which I think is hard for some parents, especially the parents that we work with. Sometimes we see that they have a hard time saying no when people want them to do something. They go beyond their boundaries. They stretch themselves really thin, and I even see it on many places where people have a hard time saying no to someone. And so they need for us to be able to model that for them. Um, Let your kids hear you say no and tell them why. I had to say no because of this and because of that. I was too busy. I couldn't give it my full attention. I feel stretched as it is. I feel stressed out right now. And always use a calm and confident voice because that way that's modeling for them too. Just like I told Luke, I'm not going to talk right now because I can see that you're upset and I'm upset. I'm not willing to talk when you're upset or I am. And then claim the times when you do well. Tell them about it. Your experiences with, I'm glad I did that. I'm glad I said no because I was just stretched too thin. Now I feel like I can relax a little bit. They need to understand why and how to say no. So they need to hear about it and watch us do it too. And then I added this for my group that Luke, Joe, and I were talking to because these were moms who had preschoolers, and I wanted them to see this book because this book is just about this little kid who it's his birthday and people are grabbing him and hugging him, and his grandma pinches his cheek and his brother tickles him. And then finally, everybody in the family is going through this, well-meaning because it's his birthday and they want him to feel happy. But, nobody's, everybody's just grabbing him. And finally, a clown shows up and, is in his face and starts tickling him or something. And he's finally just had enough. And he explains to his family, sometimes I don't want to be touched. And it was just a nice way for these moms to be able to talk to when they have their kids when it's early childhood, under 5 years old. And so we're always telling them, one good way of talking to kids about important subject is by reading books to them. And so that's why I picked out this one so they could see that. And then I also wanted to share with them body safety rules because that's boundaries too for kids. They need that. And that first one is exactly what we just were talking about, being able to say no when you feel it's important, learning that you can give consent and for other kids to learn what consent means. And that we can look for early warning signs. and they can look for early warning signs. If they feel frightened or unsafe, they might sweat. It says on there, that little purple square, I might get funny feeling in my stomach, or my heart might beat really fast. And those are called early warning signs. I used to do that with my kids when we would walk in the neighborhood. We don't have any sidewalks. And if we had to go from, one place to another and cross where cars were going to be, I would always tell them, you tell me when it's safe, when it feels right. I wanted them to start understanding, body signs about when something feels safe and when it doesn't. And then that also talks about having 5 people. That's your safety network. I can tell these people anything and they'll believe me. And so we need to talk to kids about what a safe person means. Somebody who keeps your confidence, who will listen to you and help you if you need it. And about how important it is not to keep secrets. What good secrets are, like, we're going to have a surprise party for grandma, or what bad secrets are when somebody wants you to do something that makes you feel uncomfortable. And then also explaining body parts, the whole bathing suit body parts thing. So I wanted to add this to them to start teaching kids about consent and about, them having bodily autonomy and not having just anybody touch them if they're not comfortable with it. And then last but not least, I wanted to also add this into it because these are some of the things that we have at CARE. This is Camp CARE, but we also have a leadership camp for kids where for middle school kids, and they're free camps. This particular one, Camp CARE, these are last year's dates, obviously, but it's for kids preschool to high school. And they can learn things like managing emotions and resisting peer pressure and making healthy choices. And the leadership camp for middle school kids is the same thing. Joe does that. So you can talk about, what do they learn in those leadership camps, Joe? I know it's interpersonal skills, but what else do they learn?
Yeah, they learn about self-esteem, decision-making, goal setting, emotional management. Then there's the one about cigarettes and alcohol and drugs, refusal skills on how to, stay away from that peer pressure or face that peer pressure, communication skills, healthy relationships. So it's 1 week long, and each day we learn a couple skills. We play games around them. We practice the skills. We have fun and interactive activities where they can use the skills and stuff. And it's really great because they don't teach that stuff in school. That's not a core curriculum. Communication and healthy relationships and emotional management and resiliency and stuff like that.
I think it goes a long way to helping kids understand boundaries, especially if they're coming from households that, might have mental health issues or might have, substance use issues, where it's harder for them to draw boundaries, for Camp CARE. And as far as middle school too, like Joe says, they don't really teach that. And a lot of parents have problems with trying to figure out how to teach boundaries. So leadership camp can help them understand those things too. Okay.
Yeah, and I think if the parents at home don't deal with the attitudes in this healthy way that we all kind of discussed here in this forum here, if parents don't deal with that attitude in a healthy way, then it just goes down, like Brian Post says. So now it turns into feelings and outbursts, then it turns into behavior. So we have healthy, wonderful relationships with our children, and we can communicate, their behavior and the things we want changed, and we have a nice, engaging, respectful communication. But other parents who may not communicate to their children like that, who stomp on the attitude, stomp on the feelings, stomp on the behavior, it just kind of creates more of this explosive attitude that you see. And like those examples you said, this people in your classroom that you say will just give you power struggles all the time. They hate authority. They will push against authority at any cost because they need to protect themselves, and they didn't learn healthy ways to do that. All right, we come to the end of another training.
What are you going to talk about on Thursday?
Thursday, we are talking about school success, 7 smart things that parents can do to help their children succeed.
Good. Okay.
And since we have all educators in the room, I'm going to want some of your ideas also.
You guys got any comments, questions?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Very good.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
You guys have a great day, and we'll see you on Thursday. We will be
Thank
talking
you.
about
Bye.
student
Bye-bye.
success in school.
So at the most, there was 17 people, right?
Yes.
Okay.